Good evening, everyone. I'll turn on my microphone here. And I'm Tom Jacobs, and welcome to the Bennington Select Board meeting of September 25th, 2017. I have the pleasure of sitting as chair this evening. I think before we start, if I could just, maybe we could introduce ourselves. The coach down here on the left.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Hello, Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
I'm Jim Carroll.
Good evening, Carson Thurber.
Hi, I'm Jean Connor.
I'm Stuart Hurd, town manager, and Linda Bermudez to my right.
I'm sorry?
Linda Bermudez to my right.
You got it. Thanks, Linda, as ever. At this point, it's our practice to open our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. If, Jeannie, could you just lead us in the pledge tonight?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've all been favored with copies of the minutes from the September 11th meeting, as well as the warrants. I've reviewed them, and I expect others have as well. As we do, the consent agenda is available for a motion to accept them.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion, any questions, comments, or edits that you would like to propose? And seeing Jean has none, I think
If Jean has none, then.
I think it's, thank you. Therefore, all in favor of the accepting the consent agenda as a motion, signify by aye.
Aye.
And that looks to be 7 of us in favor and no one objecting. We do have an opportunity for citizens' comments. I see this evening that we have Robert Plunkett, who is going to just talk or chat with us about the charter forum that's coming up next week.
Hello, I'm Robert Plunkett. I'm co-chair of the Charter Review Committee, and I'm not here to discuss it. I'm just here to extend the invitation again that this Wednesday at 5:30 right here, we're having an informational forum meeting session where our municipal law consultant, Jim Barlow, will be giving a presentation about what a municipal charter is, different forms of government, how you might amend the charter, and he'll be answering questions that are asked from anyone that is there. So, thank you.
And that's this Wednesday.
This Wednesday, the 27th, 5:30. It's scheduled from 5:30 until 7:30, I believe.
Go ahead, any questions?
I'm going to be out of town, I'm sorry to say, but will it be on Cat TV?
It will be on Cat TV.
Great.
Good. Any other questions for Rob? No? Good. I think we're all set then. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have an application for a municipal planning grant for consideration. Is Dan going to lead the discussion on that?
Sure, I've got it easy tonight. I just have to introduce Michelle. So
That's good.
Michelle Morocco is here tonight from the Bennington County Regional Commission. She's the Community Development and Economic Development Assistant for BCRC. Did I get that close enough? She's going to be requesting that the Select Board approve a municipal grant, some planning grant application to develop a cultural plan for Bennington County. This is a consortium between Bennington and Manchester. The Bennington Planning Commission has reviewed the request and has recommended approval. And I'll leave the details up to Michelle.
Thanks. Hi. So.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Lead us through the first part of the discussion.
Sure.
And we'll make
So, as Dan mentioned, I'm asking for your approval to apply for a municipal planning grant for a cultural plan for Bennington County. And a cultural plan is essentially like any other plan. We're looking at ways to take our cultural economy and harness that to then improve our general economy throughout the county. We have a lot of cultural resources from Manchester on down. We've been named number 3 in small communities for vibrant arts communities. We've been getting a lot of recognition nationally recently, and this is a really great time to leverage that and move forward. Back in 2012, the Select Board initiated the conversations about a cultural plan for the town of Bennington specifically, which led to the Cultural Bennington Planning Committee, which has since grown into the Bennington Area Arts Council. So that's been going on for the last 5 years or so. We've been making significant progress along the way. And so this grant is asking for $35,000 with a $10,000 match. And should it be approved, and then if it's awarded, it will begin December of this year and go for a year and a half. That match can be covered in RPC, Regional Planning Commission staff time. So while it's not necessary that the towns of Bennington or Manchester provide a match, ideally we would love for the towns to both put some amount in to show their support for the project. Manchester has suggested a match not quite evenly split. Their suggestion was that we base that match on meals, room, and alcohol tax, of which Manchester's are slightly higher, which means they'd pay about $5,100, whereas Bennington would pay $4,900. That's all very flexible. We don't need to make those decisions tonight. Mostly, I'm looking to know if you are in support of this grant proposal and that we would need a municipal resolution.
Could you just give us some more details of the grant? The boards have the opportunity to review it, but maybe just sort of give an overview of what the process will be, who will be reviewing it, what are the strengths, weaknesses, or things that we should be considering in our discussion tonight.
Sure.
Can you move the microphone a little
closer?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
How's that?
Perfect. Yeah.
Better? Okay. So the project as we proposed it is broken down into 7 tasks, starting with an assessment of what exists and the creation of a steering committee. That steering committee would be made up of individuals from all over the county. So that's municipal and town officials, local business owners, representatives of artists and arts organizations. And in this context, we're defining cultural kind of loosely. We have some groundwork that's been done in Bennington with the cultural summits that happened back in 2012, 2013, but we don't have as much information in Manchester. So part of the initial phase will be defining what culture is in this plan. So from there, we will do an inventory, map our cultural assets as they exist throughout the county, and then look to other examples. There's some really great examples of cultural planning within Vermont, in Brattleboro, other small communities throughout New England. I think North Adams is a close one. They just went through this process. So we'll mine the resources in the internet and all of that for relevant examples. And then from there, we'll work with the steering committee as well as individuals and members of the community to establish a vision and a set of actions and goals for our county specifically. And then we'll work on creating a plan, which we'll then present to the community.
I have some questions.
Please.
Yeah, maybe I just want to maybe amplify us on some of the things, and we go into more of the specific questions. This grant application is a federal grant. Is it administered
It's a
through
state
the
grant.
state?
Yeah, it's administered
But it's
through the state.
administered through the state.
Yes.
So is there a benchmark, or how do we measure the success or not of the grant process?
So some of that will come through the planning process itself. So depending on what our goals are, we do plan to create both of the plan and an implementation plan. So for this project specifically, that's what most of our measure will be based on how many community members we get involved and the creation of this plan itself.
Okay. I will start with Jean. maybe?
Okay. The only question I have is, can a cultural asset, I'm assuming it doesn't have to be a building, it can be an event? It can.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Let's see, where do I start? 2 questions on, how do you define cultural? And what would the focus be? One of the things that Bennington has suffered from is multiple personality disorder insofar as trying to identify, the things that make us who we are. And the historic importance of Bennington's history is something that I wonder if you would concentrate when you put it under the rubric of, a cultural, what's the phrase I'm looking for?
Asset?
Yes. And if you would limit it, if the focus would be narrow, because you don't have a lot of money, but, the history of Bennington and its importance from before the Revolution and during the Revolution is certainly an important component to that. And to that end, there's a fellow here in Bennington, he owns the Paradise Motor Inn, Phil Pappas, who is steeped in the history of the Battle of Bennington and the building of the battle monument, that I would hope you would join in getting his expertise.
So to your first question, how we're defining culture, like I said before, part of that process will be defining what culture is. What's been determined so far in Bennington does absolutely include history. Throughout the county, I would assume as much. It's New England, our revolutionary roots and various historical aspects are really important here. And so from what I've seen so far, I can presume that our culture will include things like art, performing arts, music, history, culinary. We've got a lot of resources here that we'd like to include.
All right, well, it's going to be, if we approve it tonight, it'll be $45,000. Can this be a rotating and repeating grant?
Do you mean can we apply for it for the same
Yes.
thing again?
Yes.
I don't believe so, not quite the same way. So part of the process and the procedure will be coming up with a maintenance plan.
And the reason that I ask that is that, if it's spread too thin, how much do you really get done? If you can focus on one specific area at a time, and I think, at the top of the list, for me anyway, would be the history of the town, and really be able to do something effective and meaningful,
Yeah.
rather than spreading it out too thin.
To them. Yeah, we do have a lot of different organizations and individuals that that comprise the creative economy. And so my guess is that many people throughout the country, throughout the county, will agree that the historical significance is very important. And so that's part of setting a cohesive vision and a shared set of goals, is that we decide which elements we would like to focus on and narrow that down.
Good. That's great to hear.
Donald?
I think this is exciting, Michelle. And, I'm a planner, so I like plans.
Great.
But I think it's always worth, every time you do a plan, I think it's worth really stating the need for it and the sort of compelling reason why it's worth spending a relatively large amount of money on doing something like this. So I wonder if you could give us some examples of other communities in Vermont that have found these useful, or you must have done some kind of baseline research in getting ready to apply for this. But could you give us some context on why this is a good investment and how it would be something that would immediately benefit Bennington?
So broadly, arts jobs and creative jobs, which includes your maintenance staff at museums, it includes designers, it includes, we've got in Manchester, in the North Shire, we have a bunch of businesses that have this like design focus, and that may be manufacturing, but designing manufacturing sort of things. Arts and creative jobs make up about 4% of the national economy, of jobs nationally. And so locally, we have examples like Brattleboro, which is very similar in size and demographic, and has gone through this huge revitalization, largely because of their arts community. There are other examples nationally, most of which are bigger cities, so they're not quite the same and they don't transfer quite as well. But as for the state of Vermont, your primary example is Brattleboro. We have an opportunity to do something really innovative and set a precedent for the rest of the state with this project, which is really exciting. But as you likely know, in Bennington, we have high rates of unemployment, high rates of poverty, and not that one plan can fix any of that, but one plan can help us to leverage a sector of our economy that's really disjointed right now. We have a lot of resources, a lot of assets, a lot of people who care deeply, who live under this arts umbrella. And if we can better coordinate them through a shared vision and build some community, some of that touchy-feely, community pride within that sector, we can then leverage that to potentially create more jobs, to work with the schools and create more opportunities, and also to better use and leverage resources. Right now, there's a huge problem throughout the country, and especially throughout Vermont, where our nonprofits and our arts organizations are underfunded, are understaffed, and are relying on the same volunteers over and over again, so people are tired. And if we can find a way to coordinate those people, we can relieve some of the stress and some of the burden, so that maybe rather than competing for the same resources, they can share them.
So did Brattleboro have a cultural plan that they followed, and was that part of their roadmap to becoming a very strong arts community?
Yeah, they have, it's a pretty small one, actually. It's a few pages in their town plan that they've adopted that steered them and helped them prioritize.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So yes, the steering and prioritizing seems like it would be a real asset to this community, so that we do see our cultural assets in a way that we can move forward. So I'm really happy that you're doing this. I had, I think, two questions. One about the $10,000 match.
Yep.
So my understanding is BCRC staff time is basically that $10,000 match, but then is there also a request that Manchester and Bennington towns create a match as well? Is that?
So it would be coming from that $10,000. So we are prepared and able to cover $10,000 in match entirely, but ideally each town would contribute some amount so that we wouldn't be matching the full 10,000, just to show support. And
Okay.
it's possible we could get parts of that match elsewhere, but.
And when would you need that commitment? Are you asking for that for a commitment tonight to put some money toward it, or what do you need? What do you need from us around that tonight?
So I don't need a commitment tonight.
Okay.
Tonight, I would simply like to know if you approve the proposal and going forward with this grant. I would imagine that the final details of that match will need to be worked out together with Manchester, and what is fair for both towns and what can be afforded. And so I would say that moving forward to figure that out, we would likely have to take this to a separate meeting with both towns where we discuss what we're able and willing to do.
Okay, all right, that's helpful, thank you. And then my other question, just in terms of once you have you've defined cultural and identified assets and created a plan, so the task 7 is to produce a plan, and then a final public meeting will be held to share the plan with the community. Are you, so in this process, are you seeing sort of a meeting where you say, so here's the plan that we've been working on, ta-da, or, are you envisioning working sessions throughout this to involve the community that might have a stake in cultural assets but might not be directly involved themselves?
Both.
Okay.
So we've planned for 3 public community meetings.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, one final meeting, which is essentially our last hurrah, this thing has happened. And then looking forward from that, there will be a piece, if not the entire plan, depending on its length, to be adopted into town plans.
Okay, okay. And so then the final piece is to have us be part of the town plan. Okay, all right. I think it's very exciting. Thank you.
I'm also.
Can I ask one more?
Go ahead, I was going to ask a question. That's great.
No, go ahead.
No,
I heard you talk about Manchester and Bennington. There are quite a few cultural assets in Arlington, too. So what's I assume it's not just Bennington and Manchester, but you were talking about all of Bennington County?
Yes, so it's all of Bennington County, but because it's a consortia project, we need 2 municipalities to sign on as applying for the grant. And so those are Bennington and Manchester, but our work will expand to the rest of the county.
Okay.
I think another way to measure the success of this program and the grant is as we look forward to economic developments. What we're all about down deep is that this has the potential of really increasing and helping with labor force, with that economic part of our toolkit that probably has been under resourced, not underserved because of the organizations that have been working so hard, but they've been working over the years a lot of times independently of each other. So that's just a kudo from and a hope and expectation. The steering committee, I guess you started out and you mentioned how is that going to be recruited or comprised so that if folks have an interest in this area, they can either apply for or be solicited for. What's the plan?
So for that steering committee, there will be some folks that we know that are very active and involved in our arts community, and those that we feel should be at the table. You're going to want representatives from different municipalities. The selection of the steering committee the process is still slightly undetermined. It will likely be an open invitation at first, with some follow-up meetings and some discussion to gauge commitment, because it's not a one-off show up for a few hours and leave. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah. You're going to have to be very vested in that project, no matter if it's funded or not. This is a question really for Stu. I know we've budgeted for the regional development plans. I know you're not asking tonight for a commitment. Is this where we can possibly use some of those funds that we budget for?
It wasn't anticipated that they would be used in this manner, but certainly they could be.
Because that was for regional development per se, right?
Yes.
Whether or not this fits the bill, I'm just looking for ways to find $5,000 to whatever $1,000 without having to go.
And it could be that we look at the various contingencies within the general fund budget. The board contingency is kind of being used to supply the Charter Review Committee with materials and those kinds of things, but there is also a contingency at the final end of the budget that might be, I think it has 20,000 in it this year, might be able to be accessed should you decide to do so. I do have a question, though.
Yep, please.
Michelle, has Manchester signed on to this?
Not yet. I've been talking with Manchester. They're very interested. I'm going to their select board tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask about the timeline?
Yeah.
What is your proposed timeline for this?
So the application is due October 2nd. Awards are made or decided upon mid-December of this year. So work will likely begin January 1 of 2018, it's next year, 2018, and go for 18 months.
18 months, okay.
Will there be any intermediate reporting out so that the communities, I guess that's maybe in the forums that you and Jeannie were just discussing?
Yes, they'll be through those community meetings.
Okay.
I have a question, Tom.
Yep.
Our economic development, new economic development director raised your hand.
Community development.
Community development. Raised your hand when I talked about, further or future budgeting for this. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Sir, right, you better come up to the mic.
My point was not so much about budgeting, but more to the point about what is a cultural resource, and what is, to Donald's question about what is the efficacy of a plan like this. And I think, even just with the example of, what are our historical assets, I think one of the advantages or one of the hopes of a plan like this is that it opens up for us the scope of what we've been considering historical assets. Of course, the monument and our revolutionary history is a really obvious and important component of that, but equally for many people, Bennington is an important marker within the history of the Underground Railroad. So I think having a conversation where, which allows us to introduce new possibilities to how we understand that history, is really opening up the terms of that thing that we called culture. So I think this could be a really exciting way to move forward with that.
Awesome. I've got, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent on this, but Phil Pappas has designed these bronze tablets that mark important points in our revolutionary history, and right along with the Underground Railroad. And I wonder if there would be some funding source that could get this done.
I think the minute we actually begin a conversation about the arts are a priority for us, and the culture is a priority for the town, we can then begin to approach further grant possibilities for that as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Unless there are further questions or exchange, I would like to just request that the board consider a motion and to adopt a resolution for a municipal planning grant application as provided in our materials.
So moved.
Have a motion? Second?
Sure. Second.
Okay. Further discussion or questions on it?
Just feel like we need to find out, A, what Manchester's level of interest is, and B, what we do about the $10,000 piece. Just from a strategic point of view, it's hard for us when you come here and say, well, we have the money for this, but if you want to chip some of the taxpayer money in, you can. So that's a difficult, it puts us in a little bit of a difficult spot, but maybe between Tom and Stuart, there can be some clever thinking on that. So
Would Manchester be obliged to make the same sort of donation?
I can't quite say. They suggested the split in the match in which they paid a little bit more, so I would think so, but I can't answer that tonight.
They're a gold town, dig them.
now, we're all part of the Shires.
The essence of it is, though, at this particular point in time, the financial piece is not, of our contribution or not, is not it. It's really to make the application and come back to, I think, those issues. So I think it presupposes that Manchester is also going to be interested in moving on the grant application. And then when we get that sort of running in the same path, then we can deal with the financial aspects of whether or not we contribute, they contribute, how much, and if it's needed.
Tom, I've got one final question. If Manchester should decline, would we then therefore get the entire $35,000? No?
If they say they do not want to
participate.
No, then the level goes down. I think it's 15,000 is the next maximum amount, which I could rework the application to simply focus on Bennington.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, all in favor of the application for the municipal planning grant signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor and no opposition to that. Michelle, keep us posted and appreciate your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Stu, you've got some information relative to pending tax sales.
Yes. After the redemption period has expired on properties that we took at tax sale in 2016 of June of 2017, that redemption period ended. The properties became ours via the statutes, and we have determined that we seek to sell them to try to recover the delinquent amounts. We advertised 5 properties for sale by sealed bid, and we have received bids on 4 of those that were worthy of consideration here at the board level. Should you decide to accept those bids, then there is a 30-day appeal period under law that a petition by 5% of the legal voters could attempt to prevent you from selling the properties at the amounts determined. And I have provided the bid notice, the bid summary. In all cases except the case of 213 Grove Street, the bids exceeded the minimum amount. And what that means is when the closing takes place, we get the taxes and fees that are due on the property. Any excess amount goes to the prior property owner. So we will not get all of this money, but the majority of it. In the case of 213 Grove Street, I included the reasoning behind the lower bid. The property has been vacated for a long, long time. It's in very, very tough shape. And I think and recommend to the board that we accept this bid. I don't think we'll be doing better than that. In this particular case, the minimum bid was $38,687. We have a bid of $30,000. And that is the only one that does not exceed the minimums. There was one property, 186 South Branch, where the only bid was way too low. We have re-advertised that, and that bid opening is coming within the next several days. So I suspect that we will have at least one and potentially 2 or 3 bids on that property, judging on the contacts I've had from people. So we'll be back to you with the last property at a future meeting. So I am here tonight looking for you to accept bids on 213 Grove Street at $30,000, 217 Washington Avenue at $28,000. Now, we have found out that there may be a sewer problem there that was not anticipated, so that cost may change slightly, but we will be above the minimum regardless. On 816 Main Street, a minimum bid of $37,401, and on 937 Gage, a minimum bid of $28,600.
Great. Thanks, Stu. I would like to deal with the properties with the exception of 213 Grove Street at this point, and I'll tell you why I'm deferring on that. So we have 217 Washington Avenue, 816 Main Street, and 937 Gage Street. Will the board accept the bids as presented through the manager's office? A motion for that purpose?
Motion to accept the bids.
Second.
Further discussion on those?
Stuart, I wonder if it's worth just, I'm sorry about this, I don't mean to hold this up, but I wonder if it's worth you just repeating what you said when you very first started about paying back the back taxes and then the rest of the money going to the landowners. Would you just say that a little bit more slowly, please, so everyone, these prices are not based on what's owed for taxes.
The value of the property.
Right. The minimum bid that you saw on the bid notice was the amount of delinquent taxes and legal fees that have been associated with the tax sale of the property itself a year ago. The minimum bid in every case except Grove Street has exceeded the minimum amount.
Okay.
We get to keep the amount that is the minimum bid. That is our costs associated with the property. The prior homeowner will get any excess funds that arise from the sale.
All in favor of accepting the motion and the bids as presented, signify by aye.
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 That's 7 in favor and no objections. As to 213 Grove Street, I'm going to defer and abstain, recuse from that because I do represent Southern Vermont Healthcare Corporation, and I see that they were the bidder. So if there is, I will turn the chair over to the vice chair.
Okay, so I guess we'll have discussion on 213 Grove Street. It seems like the obvious question, Stuart, would just be, there's an $8,000 kind of
Shortfall.
donation from the town to the
Yeah,
project.
essentially that will be written off We don't end up paying ourselves delinquent taxes. And the excess or the lack of funds will be written off once the sale has taken place.
Stu, how long do these bids go out for, and how long do we advertise?
The bids were advertised in the Bennington Banner on August 11th. They were opened on September 12th. So about a little over 30 days.
What kind of response do you get generally?
Well, this is the first time for us. We rarely take properties at sale. In these particular cases, we determined in 2016 that it was unlikely that the current owners of these properties would come forward because
So they've been in arrears for how long?
at least 2 years, and many of these it goes back 3 to 5 years. And in some of these cases, the property has been foreclosed upon and abandoned. The mortgage company has chosen not to exercise its rights. In one of these cases, there was a federal lien that prevented most people from even looking at the property. The federal lien will be also exercised by the tax sale. So in effect, we took properties that we thought we could then turn around and at least gain the minimum amount of the delinquency to essentially bring our books current on these particular properties. The sealed bid was the option we chose. We could have done a public auction, we could have done a whole host of things, but when you do a public auction, you also have to allow the auctioneer a certain amount of the
So
proceeds.
my question for you and for the general public is, what's the guillotine point where you say, you warn the property owners that, look, you're behind, and this is what we're going to do, and this is, what's the time frame?
After 2 years delinquency, without any attempt at any kind of a written agreement for monthly payments or weekly payments, we send a notice that the property is considered for tax sale. In most cases, either the banks or the property owners will then understand that we are serious, and the banks will either make the payment and take whatever action they have against the mortgage holder, or in many cases, those folks come in and they sign an agreement with us and pay us what they can afford to pay us on a monthly basis. I mean, we're not looking to sell people's houses out from under them, but we carry a fairly large delinquency because our delinquency includes the school delinquency from several, and that was a decision made many, many years ago. So it is important that these, when the school gets their money after taxes, they get the full amount of their budgets. We accept whatever delinquency. So it's important that we continue to move these properties. And as you may know, on October 3rd, we'll be having tax sales from the 2017-16 fiscal years. There are currently 18 properties that were on the list. I think several of those will be removed. We have been contacted by mortgage holders and others who are stepping in to assist the property owners with the delinquency. And we basically tell people, if you can get it down to a 1-year delinquency, we will stop the sale. But we have been through the three notice period. There is a monthly notice that must be done. All of our legal fees have been expended, so we're down to the final count. At this point, we're looking at the list to see whether or not there might be some properties that we feel we have to step in and take those as well. The redemption period is a year, so the current homeowner or property owner has a year in which to redeem that property, and in many cases that happens. In these cases, it did not.
So it's gone beyond 1 year. These will be final sales? Is that what you're saying?
These are final sales, yes. These were from a tax sale that was conducted in June of 2016.
Okay, final question for you.
We're going to cut you off after this, Jim, and let other people get in.
I'll let you know when I'm done. What I'm curious about is, why would banks just abandon these mortgages?
In some cases...
It's basically a bookkeeping scenario. They could write it off and get actually more tax benefit by writing it off than trying to pursue it.
And in many cases, the buildings are underwater.
Yeah.
They're not worth what the mortgage is being carried on because their maintenance has been such that they have deteriorated.
And by visiting most of these properties, you'll quickly see.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. A lot of them look pretty abandoned.
I
right now,
yield the
yeah,
floor
so.
to Mr. Campbell.
Well, thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to comment on, let's try to stick with 213 Grove Street at this point. Chad? Jeannie?
No, I mean, I know the bid's under, but that's 30,000 that we don't currently have, if we could get it.
Anyone on this side? No?
These are all residences, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think most of us on this board are really pleased to have the Healthy Homes Initiative for Bennington happening, and a lot of great places starting to get fixed up. And so I think we would be very in support of this. Is there anybody that would like to speak briefly? I don't know, Dan, do you want to say anything about that initiative, kind of approximately?
I wasn't prepared, but I'm happy to. As I am a member of that board, the Healthy Homes Board, and I will say I think it's reflected in the information that you have that a detailed assessment of the property was done and an appraisal, and we feel pretty confident that's what the property is worth. So, and we look forward as an organization to revitalize and renovate that property and get it to a deserving family.
About how many homes have Healthy Homes worked through so far?
We finished 2. We're starting our 3rd, and this would be our 4th.
That's great. And the ones you're working on are the really hardcore cases, and it's really great to see some of them put back in the tax rolls and looking nice again.
Well, the concept is we don't want to compete with anybody else as far as for properties. If these are properties that no one else wants, and we step in and take them and hope to make them useful again.
Great.
So.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
No.
Okay, so it seems like $8,000 seems like a good price to, good ante here.
I think so.
All right, well, I guess I'd accept a motion to approve this one. Anyone's?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone second?
A second.
Jeannie, second? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Great. You've got the floor back, mister.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stu, you mentioned that there are other tax sales imminent, and how many of those did you say?
There were 18 properties as of last week when I did my manager's report, but I understand that there potentially 2 of those have been removed as of today. I think there were some promises made by certain banks that they were going to be sending us a check in the full amount. So we go right up to the deadline. And we've actually had calls that have come in on the date of the sale and pulled it because it was sufficient to cover the taxes. So we'll see.
We'll move right into your report then.
You just want to repeat the day and time of that sale?
It is October 3rd, and it begins at 10 a.m. at the town offices.
The bid is done right on the front porch?
Last year we did it, or 2016, we did it out in the kind of the backyard. We had quite a turnout. Probably 20 to 25 participants.
Be interesting to watch.
So,
Yeah,
the year before that, we were in the conference room itself.
Are there any, crazy bidding wars?
There were a couple of crazy bidding wars, but
I think I'd like to watch that for
Yeah,
theater.
let's go. Bring some popcorn. You got it.
Also hot dogs.
Most of the time, the activity is very quiet, and the silence kills you almost.
Is it? Yeah.
It's not much activity. It's not like what you see in the...
All right, I have one action item in the manager's report tonight, and that's the Fallapalooza street closing request from the Bennington Downtown Alliance. This would be for Saturday, October 28th from 7 a.m. until 4 p.m. The streets are to be closed are Main Street from the Four Corners, east to Valentine, School Street from Main to Pleasant, and Silver Street from Main to Union.
I forecast rain.
That seems to be the case with Fallapalooza. Yes, I agree.
The Great Pumpkin.
Jim.
The Great Pumpkin Challenge.
What'd you say, Tom?
The Great Pumpkin Challenge, I think, the first year.
Yeah.
We need a motion?
Yep.
So moved.
All right, thank you.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion on that motion to close for that period of time? If none, signify by aye.
Aye.
And that's 7 in favor and no opposition to that motion being accepted.
And just a couple of announcements. One I meant to do last time, but the time got away from me. Hydrant flushing. The Biannual hydrant flushing began today, and it will be over the next 2 weeks. And folks, if your water turns brown after the flushing, just run your cold water, not your hot water, your cold water until it clears, because we're going to be stirring up the lines with the flushing. It generally takes us 2 weeks to get through the entire system. So that has begun today. And just a reminder to everyone that on October 2nd, which is next Monday night at 6 o'clock, in this facility, we'll have a public hearing on the $9.85 million wastewater treatment facility bond question.
Okay. At what time again was that?
That will begin at 6 o'clock here.
Okay.
On the 2nd.
On the 2nd.
A week from tonight?
When will the ballots be ready? for that?
Ballots are ready now.
They are, okay, thank you.
Right. Other informational, other things you want to share with the board?
That's it for me.
Okay. Other business tonight, Jean?
I would just like to thank Donald for the amazing work that he did on the Act 46 process. I know it was long. You were obviously the perfect person for the job. A group that needed some leadership, and you provided it. So I would just like to personally thank you for all the hours that you put in, and I would encourage the public to participate in the process, come to the forums where they can learn about what this could look like for us, and to pay attention to the facts and not emotion.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else?
That's all.
I'll go right to Donald then, so you can accept the kudos.
Oh, well, thanks, Gene. I appreciate it. It was truly a group effort. We had a great committee that worked very hard throughout June, July, and August. And that's a tough time to pull meetings together. And this group met very regularly for quite a while during that period of time. So thanks for giving me the credit, but really the whole group gets the credit. It was very satisfying, though, to take that Act 46 merger plan up to the Agency of Education and have them pass it in record time after watching a lot of other communities flail away in front of the committee. And they really liked our proposal, so pleased about that. It is very nuanced, and there's a lot to it. And but what we've proposed is a lot better than what will happen if the state comes down here and merges us. That's the bottom line. And so I hope people will read through it and be willing to be open to the information so that we can hopefully take advantage of it. It means a lot to our community, both I think in terms of the quality of our education, future quality of our education, but also there's a very large financial impact too. So thank you for that.
When's the vote?
The vote's going to be on November 7th. It's a governance merger proposal. It's not a school merger. It's a governance merger. So we're talking about combining some school boards so that we have fewer school board members per student, and that we get into a little bit more balanced ratio there. And that vote will be on November 7th. At the same time, the community will also be asked to vote on directors for that board. So if the district is created, if the merged district, which would be called the Mount Anthony Unified School District, is created, it will also need a board of directors. And so there'll be 11 members that would be from the towns that vote to merge. And of those towns, it would be 3 of either Bennington would be 1, and then either Pownell, Shaftesbury, or Woodford. 2 of those would have to join in order for us to create the merge. And if we do that, there will be a board of all members. But we will have to vote directors for all communities, it appears, including North Bennington. And so even though North Bennington will not be voting on the merge proposal, it looks like North Bennington will be voting on directors, or may be voting on directors. There's a process for electing directors if they choose not to vote on directors. But for the rest of the community, it's really important to know that you have 2 weeks to get some signatures together and to get on that November 7th ballot to be a director of what may be the Mount Anthony Unified School District.
And the structure is basically the way the Mount Anthony school board is structured now, the same
That's
proportion?
one of the biggest points of our merger proposal is that we decided to acknowledge the fact that the Mount Anthony Union High School board structure has worked well for us as a larger community. So Pownell and Shaftesbury and North Bennington and Woodford have had a seat at the table. They haven't had as big a seat as Bennington, but they've had a big enough seat that they felt like their voices were still heard. And so some 50, 60 years ago, some people thought through what a balanced structure would look like to let all communities feel heard. And it's turned out that it works pretty well. And so our feeling is that we'd really like to merge using that structure. And I think we can be almost assured that if the state comes down and merges us, it won't look anything like that. So, Stuart?
Donald, I want to make a point, and I think I'm right on this. We're voting for those district members by district.
That's right.
Not at large as we do for Mount Anthony.
No, it's at large. It's hybrid
is
at
at
large.
large.
Yeah. So even if North Bennington chooses not to hold a vote, which they may, people could petition and get on the ballot, and they could still get voted in at large.
Thank you.
So, this is a little bit confusing on this first run, but if we do get the merger through, after that we have a district clerk, and things start to smooth out. This first vote is complicated in every community that does it. I think we've worked through most of the details, but besides our consultant and the SU, who have both been great throughout this process, the person who has been probably the most helpful person to this process is Cassie Barbeau, our town clerk, who has taken me by the ear and told me a few things about how votes work and what can and can't be done. So it's been very, very helpful having her participate in the process, and she's also working with the other town clerks. So.
Can I ask one more question about that? So is there a hearing date? Will there be a meeting?
We will be scheduling some outreach opportunities, to let people know, be talking to some of the Rotaries, and we'll be meeting with some other groups. There's a meeting coming up, there's a round robin meeting coming up on Thursday in which all the school boards decide whether or not to hold a vote. So that's something of a pivotal meeting. That's this coming Thursday.
Okay. But I mean,
that
just
won't
a
be,
general public, is there a general public hearing?
I think the committee hasn't, to be absolutely honest with you, it's been triage getting to this point. And so I think the committee is, as soon as we are sure, as soon as we get through Thursday, and we're sure that we're going to have enough communities voting, then we'll do some.
Okay.
If we don't have enough communities voting, then there won't be a vote at all. And there's no vote for directors, no vote for a merge. So after Thursday night, we should know what the status of that is.
Okay, thank you.
We'll plan some outreach though.
Back to, any more?
No, that's enough.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Act 46 gets pretty wonky pretty quickly.
Yeah.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Carson? Okay.
I never leave my keys in the van, but last week, 2 days in a row, I couldn't find my key because I had worn 2 different jackets, and I was half an hour late to both of the appointments. So Saturday night, after I went to Martin's to get some cigarettes and a sub, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do that because I had to work Sunday morning. So I tucked the key underneath my jacket in the passenger seat, and at 8 o'clock, when I woke up to shave and get cleaned up, I went to the door at approximately 8:30 in the morning, and the van was gone. And I called the police right away. Chris Lozon showed up very, very quickly, but I'm telling you, I was in mortal fear of having to call my boss. But by 1 o'clock, through Chris Lozon's hard work, the van was located behind Easy Way Rental. And the only things taken were a charger for the phone, that you plug into a lighter, and my set of keys that had keys to my apartment, my truck, and a vial, a metal vial, with some of my father's ashes. And I always kept that because I wanted my dad to be with me every day. So for the individual that stole that key ring, I hope you snorted some of my father. But let me tell you, there is no cure for an overdose of Joseph Francis Carroll Sr. Thank you, that's all.
That's it?
There's nothing, I got nothing to follow that up.
I can't either. Next. Yeah, next.
I pass.
That was fun.
Chad, you have anything?
I did have one question, being Mr. Newby. Our next scheduled meeting is October 9th, but it's Columbus Day. Is that a regularly scheduled meeting? I know town offices are closed, right?
The town offices are generally open on the 9th. We use the 9th and Veterans Day as a floating holiday, so people who have children, the children are off on one day or the other are allowed to switch, but the town offices will be open and we would normally meet.
Okay, thank you.
I defer to the board. Comfortable.
It's fine.
The only... I defer to see on the 9th.
We haven't recovered
Yeah.
from the story. It's already-
The only question I think I meant to ask Stu of you is the software fix relative to the meter issue that's been still out there.
We're working on it. We haven't got it done yet, but we are working on it. Linda's nodding.
Are you keeping in touch with particularly
With Abby, yes.
Abby's
Yes,
situation?
I haven't contacted her within the last week, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Other business? I don't want to set any records, but
Less than an hour, can you believe it?
there's something wrong because we didn't stack the agenda enough.
Feast or famine around here.
Yes. Speaking of, the why, we're talking about having a further presentation on that for the second meeting in October. When are we having the rescue squad?
The rescue squad will be with us on the 9th.
Okay, so maybe with those two things, that should be enough to fill our agenda. Because the goal is probably to keep our agenda to like one or two major issues and then some side stuff so that we don't try to bite off too much during one particular meeting unless it becomes necessary. Just so that we can have reasonable time for both the public and the board to deal with the matters that come before us.
I have one more thing. Is this something that we need to be paying attention to, or is this literally just an FYI?
It literally is just an FYI.
Okay, I had some concerns, but... if it's
She's
just-
referring to the HUD report
Yeah.
on the housing
It
authority.
seems like there's some progress, but there's a lot of progress yet to be made.
The only other thing as we adjourn is that we had a sort of a practice to invite businesses and or to come to visit with us, you know, in a sort of a cordial sit down, not a particular agenda type of thing, just to, and I'd like to resurrect that because we've got a number of new businesses that can use the exposure and also the inquiry from the community and the board. So if you have any organizations or businesses, commercial, large commercial, small commercial, restaurants that might just want to come and talk about how we as the board can be more responsive, be responsive to them, not more, be responsive to their situation and also how they see the community today and what they see the community progressing tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, so just if you have one, just drop me a note, drop Stu a note, drop Dan a note. We'll go from there. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any further discussion? If not, signify aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.